everybody. I'm Toi Hutchinson, President and CEO of the Marijuana Policy Project. I'm a former legislator and a cannabis regulator, and I'm now running the nation's #1 organization that concentrates solely on changing cannabis laws across this country. Today, we are here to have a really important conversation, and it kind of grew for me in this position because I'm a parent. I had 3 amazing human beings come through me, and it's not an accident that, I'm a mom. The very first nickname I got running the legalization bill in Illinois with my cohorts, my colleagues in the Illinois State Senate, when we were all there under the General Assembly, was marijuana moms. And it was 4 women who kind of took it on in our state. And then I had to go stand it up. And now I'm here at the Marijuana Policy Project. And I thought, what better way could we do this than to be joined by 3 amazing panelists? So please welcome everyone. Nevada-based pediatrician, Dr. Carmen Jones, journalist and founder of the weed blog, Leah Maurer, and host of the Canna Mom podcast, Joyce Gerber. Thank you so much for being here, ladies. We've got plenty of mom power today on a topic that can be quite controversial and is loaded with a lot of hypocrisy and stigma. For everybody who's listening, this is a town hall discussion on talking to children about cannabis, and we want to hear from our audience as well. Please drop your questions in the chat, and there'll be time during every segment for Q&A. We apologize for the late start, post-COVID and all the rest of the stuff. We still have some tech issues to get through, but thank you so much for hanging in there with us. So let's get to it. Panelists, please tell us quickly how you entered the cannabis industry. We'll go with Dr. Carmen Jones first.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It is my absolute pleasure to be here. As mentioned in the introduction, I'm a pediatrician. I've been practicing for more than 30, actually really close to 31 now, more than 30 years now. And I entered the cannabis space about 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago, as I was asked kind of to cover for a colleague on the side who couldn't make a shift to certify patients in the state. And of course, I knew nothing about what she was doing, but okay, I'll help you out. And as it turns out, I helped her out again and again. They actually ended up hiring me at the little spot for a part-time thing. And I ended up realizing after about a year, 2 years, I was helping people, and that felt good. As a pediatrician, you feel good all the time, almost, except for when you gotta argue with a parent that's upset, but that's reasonable. But at the same time, I was getting so much positive feedback on patients that were returning to renew their certifications, literally thanking me for doing this work because they felt so much better. So I'll leave it at that for now, and allow someone else to go forward.
Great, let's go to Leah.
Hey everyone, Leah Maurer, cannabis activist and co-owner of the weed blog. Thank you so much, MPP, for having me and for putting this on. My entry into the cannabis industry, I'll try to go as quick as possible here, actually goes all the way back to 2009 when my partner Travis and I had a SWAT raid on our home in Missouri for growing cannabis in our basement, which, as you can imagine, was not received well in the middle of Missouri in 2009. And so that sort of catapulted me into an entirely different life trajectory than the one I was on. And that I had children. I now have 3. We moved to Portland, Oregon about 3 months after that event happened, and slowly got back on our feet. And fast forward into about 2015, we helped found New Approach Oregon, which was the organization that helped draft and run Measure 91, of which I became an advocate spokesperson for, and that's what successfully legalized adult use cannabis here in Oregon in 2014. I'm based and kind of just went along right with that, and many hats in the industry, focused parenting cannabis, being a mother who cannabis, consumes for it, believes in it, has been at the top of my advocacy platform since day one, because I think it's such an incredibly important topic to discuss, not just, about parents who are consuming it, but about what the education level they're getting, with them and what they're learning. So thank you again for having me.
I'm so glad you're here. So let's go to Joyce.
Thank you. Good afternoon. And yeah, thank you for hosting this. Am I echoing? Is that me? All right. So I like to say that I got into cannabis through the perfect trifecta of desperation, isolation, and rejection.
A combo. That's a heck of a combo.
I say I had a cannabis awakening in 2016. I live out in Cambridge, Mass. I'm a lawyer by training. I've been married for 30 years. I play tennis. I wear pearls, and this was not something I really believed all the things I told you about cannabis. 2016, I went to Denver with my husband just for fun. And we did a private tour of the industry, and I realized everything I knew was wrong. We came back to Massachusetts. Our kids were teenagers. We told them kids everything we know is wrong. They were psyched. And then 2016, we also, adult use was legalized in Massachusetts. And at the end of that year, a contract I was working on ended. In 2017, I couldn't get a real monetized job because I'd taken time off to be a caregiver. My professional trajectory looked really messy, and I just had a really awful, whatever, it was a weird experience for me. I was meeting lots of other women who were just like me. I think I'm the beginning of an era, like I'm the tip of the iceberg, the whole army of women like me. And I discovered I knew cannabis was a new industry for law, and I ended up in media kind of by mistake. But I can see how important it is for mothers to share their stories because everything we knew was wrong, and we could be healthier. You know, I was not a cannabis consuming mom. I could drink wine. I could figure out if I could stop at the liquor store before I went to daycare. But if I showed up smelling like a joint, I would have been, reported. So I understand how wrong that is. And I do think I can share a message with a certain demographic of people who can see me. And that's sort of where I am. And I like sharing the stories of the women building the businesses, because these are all women who have healed themselves or healed their children. And they are out there doing powerful work, and they consume, and it's when you see what it is and you know what it is, it changes your idea of this industry. That's where I'm coming from.
Happy to have all of you all here with this conversation. We're going to go back and forth with mute and unmute. I keep telling people, I'm like, I'm not a Zoom expert. But, I feel like we're all becoming that way now. But it's a really incredible medium for us to be able to be in all parts of the world and talk about these experiences. I find that when we say most of it, like what Joyce just said, most of the things that we know are wrong. One of them is that, I think there's some people who cynically approach the fact that a lot of the cannabis discussion really started as medicine. The legalization conversation, so people need access to this plant for medicinal purposes. The truth is, communities around the world for millennia have used this as medicine. Like, this is not, we're talking thousands of years here. And so, and I think all of us on the panel know the history of drug prohibition and the war on drugs here in the United States. But it's really amazing how, like if you talk to indigenous tribes and things like that, they'll say this is a reclamation of plant medicine. Again, not new to us. We know that there are large parts of the pharmaceutical industry that really, so much of this comes from plants, but you'll just know the chemical name, the scientific name, not necessarily the plant name. So you really can't harness for yourself. That's the thing that's different about cannabis, that it really does allow us to own our health in a different way. But this conversation is unique because I'm also finding in the policy space, there are a lot of people who are still really afraid to talk about it and to talk about all kinds of different aspects of it, and to be honest and forthright about how. So there's a skewed perception of who a cannabis user is, and even in legal states today, you can still lose your children in a custody battle. You can still lose your job. You can still lose your assets. You can still live with the effects of prohibition today. So these talks are really, really important. Really important. And I know this is another reason why we have Dr. Carmen Jones on here. We specifically wanted to ask a pediatrician because there's not a lot of information that people know how to get all at the same time. Like, it's here, it's not going anywhere, it's in every television, all movies, popular culture. But parents, and I was one of them, parents would be hiding their use from their kids. And the fastest growing market that's coming in here are people my age, not kids. And that's been borne out by data across the way. So all of the things that we get at like gateway drug theory, or that, it's that people don't realize it can be an exit to opiate use, not the entree to opiate use. The things that have been debunked by science over years are still in the popular conscious right now. So when you are parenting, when you are in a situation where you've got to figure out how to navigate this, talk about this, don't hold that stigma yourself. That's why we're having this talk. That's why I hope we keep having this talk. I want to jump over to, one thing I do want to point out too is that we have 18 legal states. We have 37 authorized for medicinal purposes. That is what MPP does. We go in and we change, we go in state by state and try to change these laws. As we're dedicated to doing, we've been doing it since 1995. So the track record is incredible. But let's go to the endocannabinoid system in the body. And I'm going to ask for our doctor to help us out with this discussion, because that is what I want to lead into. Like, how does cannabis affect children versus its impact on adults? It's, and then we can weave some policy things in there. But could we let's do a primer on the endocannabinoid system that every human being has?
Every human being, every animal, every mammal. So this is the important part. It's not as though one system is different than the other. Our pets have it too. So the endocannabinoid system, some would call it the 12th organ system, is very key to our very existence. It literally controls every working important function of our body, from sleep to appetite to the reproductive system. Am I clear with my audio? Are we good?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. When I'm talking to patients, and by the way, I'm actually speaking not as a pediatrician at the moment, but as a cannabis medicine doctor. So I want to make that clear. When I speak to patients about it, what I do is explain it in this way. We have receptors in our body, throughout our body. Almost all of our organ systems and most of our cells in our brain and in our peripheral nervous system and immune system, et cetera, are attached or connected in some way to this endocannabinoid system. We have two types of receptors. And for simplicity's sake, I usually refer to it this way. I say I'm giving the second grade version. And that is, we have a receptor called CB1 and CB2. This is a lock and key system that is what we call dynamic, meaning it's ever changing, ever responding to its environment, its internal environment. So this system of receptors just sitting there waiting to be activated. And what that means is the body makes its own cannabis, first of all, which is why it's called endocannabinoid within. If we supplement that system with external factors like the plant, that's considered phytocannabinoids. I know those are, I'm trying very hard to keep it simple, but nonetheless, our body makes its own cannabis pretty much, primarily through two chemicals, one called anandamide, the other called 2-AG. Very long scientific word. I will leave it at that. Okay. When the chemical engages with the receptor, remember I said type 1 and type 2, or technically called CB1 and CB2, something occurs. It's usually in response to an event. Let's say we got excited, the fight or flight routine, and maybe it went overboard. So you're very anxious. You're trying to, handle something that's affected your system. The endocannabinoid system's main purpose is to regulate our bodies, put it back in balance where it was. Otherwise, things can go awry. So it is a dynamic, meaning ever-changing, self-regulating system to keep our bodies in homeostasis or balance. And it's a simple, I hope that was simple, but what happens is, and one final thing, is because our American or human way of life today is not like it was maybe 1,000 years ago, where life may have been a lot more simple, less stress on our bodies, less imposition of outside outside organisms, outside chemicals. We have
Outside factors, all, yeah.
right, because we are in this particular way and state today, our bodies tend to be deficient of our own endocannabinoids. So we often will find benefit in supplementation through phyto or plant cannabinoids. And that is why so many people have a positive reaction to what we know now as medical marijuana or medicinal cannabis. And I think one of my colleagues, Dr. Rachel Knox, made a comment the other day saying those terms are redundant. Cannabis is medical, period. So cannabis, that is how our body will react or interact with it. So I can answer more detailed questions if they come up.
No, that's actually really, really good. And I appreciate that because it sets the stage for, typically when we talk about adult use, it's recreational. When we talk about children, it is really solely medical. And what happens in various ailments that children could possibly have benefits from cannabis treatments or cannabis therapies, or just therapeutic cannabis.
Let me add, sorry, before you ask your next question, please forgive me. Let me add.
No, go ahead.
I'm not distinguishing between adults and children just yet. There are certain consequences or things to consider as we continue our conversation, but just human being, how it works in our body. And what you just said, I want to reiterate, and that is some people use, I didn't make this up, someone else said it. Some people use the medicine just for its side effects.
Mm-hmm.
And we are calling it recreational.
Yes.
And
we could have a whole other discussion about how many people really are medicinal users in that adult use space. Users in that adult use space, and what they say on their own, the benefits they get on their own, the things that they can quantify and measure, and the stuff that we've now seen backed up by scientific research. I really appreciate that overview because a lot of people, that is a that's a piece of information that most people don't. It goes back to Joyce's earlier comment, but most of what we know is wrong. So this is absolutely an important distinction to make in the beginning. And that's why I wanted to lead it into the difference between adult use and children and how people come to this. I come from the policy space, so typically when you're arguing about patients, it's a very different discussion than when you're arguing about, or when you're discussing or debating or challenging recreation. So let's get into the difference between the way children receive it, the way adults receive it, and is it harmful? Can we just say it out in the beginning? Is it harmful for children to consume cannabis? And you can answer that, in your medical expertise, but we probably need to say that at the outset, or at least that's it.
So from a policy standpoint, there's no study that is going to confirm our suspicions that it behaves simply as it behaves. It's an endocannabinoid system, so it should react the same way in each individual. However, that is not to say that we should or could or responsibly expect that a parent should just view it the same way. We have to look at it like any other medication. You may be able to use a certain pharmaceutical in a child, but it was never tested. It was simply used off label. And that, to be honest, is the majority of the pharmaceuticals out there. So you're not going to find any physician who's probably going to say, oh yeah, have at it. But often the caveat is please use carefully, with caution, and with
guidance.
With expertise, expert guidance.
So could you give us some examples of conditions you treated with cannabis, especially in children?
So another wise colleague of mine, Dr. David Behrman, said this phrase to me, and it never left me. And what he told me was children, particularly teenagers who use cannabis without parental help, consent, or whatever, are either suffering from PTSD or ADHD until otherwise proven. And that really hit home for me because I want to give this example and then I'll stop talking. Think about the teenage boy who got in trouble because he was found with a joint. And 2 weeks later, he's the same guy. He still gets in trouble. He does it again. Doesn't really care about the consequences, but he keeps doing it. Someone needs to stop and say, why does he keep doing that? I mean, he knows he's going to get in trouble if he gets busted. So the answer is probably because he liked it. It helped him. He needed it. And he felt better. So now we are into a whole nother realm. Why are we asking the question of why is he risking his scholastic or educational future, and ask, why does he feel the need to take the risk? And so the answer is a lot of parents will choose to use it children will use it because of their self-medicating of their PTSD, ADD. A lot of the big one right now is autism. Somebody wrote anxiety, so I'll stretch that to mental health issues. They are often self-medicating, and kids are smarter than we ever were today. And they know that the safety profile of self-medicating with cannabis is a lot better than self-medicating with alcohol. And so that, to me, those are some of the major reasons, but the most common is seizure disorder.
And the kinds of successes that, we've seen really across the country. I remember working on a bill, particularly before I left the Senate, on this, about a young girl who really just wanted to go to school. And we needed to figure out how the school nurse could actually give her the medicine and the patch that she needed. And then later on, adapting that so she could go to camp. And she's now a healthy, vibrant, regular 16-year-old kid. In a very different way, but her parents had to fight. Like, they had to fight and take it all the way to the state house in order for their daughter to have access to anything like this. Let me go to Joyce. At what point do parents decide to explore cannabis for their children's medical challenges?
That's interesting. Actually, the guest I interviewed today was a cannabis refugee. Her daughter has a medical condition. She was in Florida, and they didn't have access to it. So she came here to help with her child. So that child had access to it the moment she was born. Well, not really. She was about a year, because this mother knew about CBD and seizure disorders. Again, my kids are 20 and 23. My son's a musician. I could not control him. Everybody wanted to medicate him. I never medicated him mostly because he wouldn't take it. But he learned how to control his world through music. Like, that was sort of his thing. And he discovered cannabis all by himself. I wouldn't have recommended it, but I did see that all of his friends were medicated. Like, all of my son's friends, that entire generation, we medicated all of them. They were just handing it out. And they discovered cannabis on their own. And when
you mean medicated, like ADHD disorder?
All that, pharmaceutical medications that they received, with their parents' permission at the doctor's office, because they were trying to concentrate or whatever it was that they were trying to control. And then they discovered cannabis, and they would sometimes ask me to speak with their parents, but when I first got into this industry, I didn't really understand it, and I didn't feel that comfortable. Now I would talk to anyone, but I thought that was an interesting conversation, because they were learning to use this to titrate off pharmaceuticals, just like almost every woman I've spoken to on the show. That's kind of their story, is that they came to it as a last resort. So when I talk about this as medicine, I always talk about it as, therapy. It should be part of the pharmaceutical. I think that's what the doctor would agree, that, I do say, my husband says I talk like it cures everything. I know it really doesn't, but I do know it just shouldn't be the last resort. So again, our children will do whatever we need to make them be healthy. And if you have access to this for a very young child, because she has seizure disorders, we're all learning about this. It should be something. If your child's going to be anxiety ridden as a teenager and there's access to CBD or maybe another one. But I do know it's an issue in schools. A mother I was talking to today was talking about how the nurses won't administer it. So that's and like you were saying, so it's another discussion. And I'm in Massachusetts, where everything it's all legal, and nurses are mandatory reporters. So, but they can give out pharmaceuticals. Anyways, this is a very big discussion for moms and parents, and how you use medication and what is medication. But I think children should have access to it when they need it. And then that's, just like anything else we give them, right?
Right. So Leah, what factors do you think parents should consider when thinking about medical cannabis for their children?
Sure. Well, and I want to say, and I know that it was acknowledged that, there's different levels of conversation we can have, and that even in legalized states, it's still stigmatized and you can still be in trouble for it. But I feel like I have to acknowledge that, I do live in Portland, Oregon, where we have, full adult use legalization, even decriminalized other things here. So I feel very fortunate to be sitting at the vantage point that I am, to be able to have such candid conversations with my children and with other parents about cannabis in a light that many other mothers and parents and people in general are unable to have those conversations in the places they live because of what the policy is there. So we're still working on that, right? But I think the question was, when is it appropriate? Toi?
Yeah, like when in your okay, so in your conversations with people, just what are the things that you find people are saying about like what factors they should consider, especially when there's like a risk for that. And actually, and anybody can jump in on that, but I wanted to just start with Leah because you are an activist, so I would imagine that there'll be lots of people and be like, you know what?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And, I love what Joyce just said about like, it shouldn't be the last resort. But unfortunately, that's what we see time and time and time again with children, especially. It seems like children and then our aging relatives. It's like the last resort, that we try. So I think first we got to get over that, like Joyce said. I think that's very, very important. In my, talking with other people, and then we have other people like, Toi mentioned, the people that come to my mind immediately, like, Wendy Turner's one of them. That were basically thrust into cannabis advocacy because they had, like, her son Colton had Crohn's disease. And again, they went to cannabis as the last resort, but it worked, and it worked well, and it worked consistently. And so that took them on this journey of cannabis policy advocacy specifically for their son, which ultimately helped many, many other people's children, right? And I think of Tracy Ryan with her daughter Sophie, same thing. She had a brain tumor and thrust her into advocacy, for her child because it was the only thing that was really helping. So I think, unfortunately, that's what we see with parents often, is it does come as a last resort because they've tried everything else. And you see situations with, like, what we call cannabis refugees, where they have moved states to a state that has friendlier laws, where they're able to get their children access to this medicine. There's many, many stories of that. And so I think when you're considering it, and I'm very curious to hear what the doctor has to say about this as well, but I think when you're considering it as a parent, the first thing you have to do is look at the age of your child, and your child best. So you look at your child as a whole person, as a whole being, and where their needs are being unmet, whether that be because of their physical health or their behavioral health, their mental health, or whatever it is, and make that assessment as a parent. And then, you do the best you can to talk with other people that have had that experience, do the research on your own, look at awesome organizations such as ACAM and CHEM and what they're doing, with this education around medicinal cannabis and the whole plant health and all of that stuff. So I think that's, the most important thing. And then obviously you need to assess where the policies are at in your state, because the last thing you want to do is put yourself or your child in jeopardy because you're trying to treat them. So it's a very difficult question to answer. I feel very, very fortunate that my children have been healthy. My path to getting into cannabis advocacy was very different. And it's something that, many, many parents struggle with every day, is how do I, best advocate for my child? How do I best advocate for their health? And what can I do? So yeah, I'm very curious to what the doctor has to say about this question.
So I think the good news is the majority of the things that children or that the majority of the conditions that parents seek to alleviate for their children can be managed with CBD, and namely seizures, anxiety disorders in particular. The autism a lot of times can be regulated through the receptors responsive to CBD. The reason this is interesting to me is because it seems the war is truly on intoxication. Well, unless you're talking about alcohol. You can be intoxicated with alcohol in America, but not
anytime. Yes.
But not with anything else.
Mm-hmm.
And so we know that that is a political orientation, but
construct.
at the same time,
it's a political construct.
they are continuing to criminalize or want to maintain the criminalization of anything intoxicating. So again, the good news is the majority of the conditions that are sought to be relieved by cannabis can be helped, the majority of them be helped with CBD. And so I think that that actually leads to another part of the conversation, because now there's some sort of elitist quality to the CBD is medical. This is
right.
Get you high.
That's a really good segue, because that goes right into virtue signaling
And
when you talk about this, especially in the parents community.
and it just has to stop, because it happens to be one of over 120 now cannabinoids identified in the plant. And we're vilifying the one and we're elevating the other as though it's, isolated.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that it's got to always come down to education. And the parent has to, if they cannot find a cannabis physician in their area, find me, find others. There are plenty of us out there doing this work, and we can then guide them on to, how best to take care of that particular condition for their child. And my heart goes out to the cannabis refugees. It really does.
Yeah, it's a very painful thing. Really watching people who would never support adult use legalization, but voted yes for that child. Once they could see the child and see the pain and the anguish of the kid and their whole families. I think one of the things for this segment that's probably really important when we talk about when parents should consider factors for how you use medical cannabis for your kids, or if you're even in this space right now, is that there's really nothing more powerful than a parent who strongly advocates for the health of their child. There's almost no way to get in the middle of a parent and a kid when a parent is trying to figure out how best to help their own children, and they need support. They need more language, they need more education. And for anyone who's listening right now, you need to know you're not alone. You need to know there are people who are moving states, and they're all we all are trying to change existing policies where they are the most where they're the most harmful to people who are seeking help. But please know that you're not alone, that these things are not new, and there are warriors all across the state, both in medical providers and activists and researchers and journalists and bloggers and policymakers and all those things. And we see you and we hear you, and you are not alone in this. It's a hard thing to do. And I don't know anything more painful than seeing your child in pain and you can't fix it by yourself. So to not have this available is just wrong. It's just wrong, besides the fact that it's inhumane too.
You actually brought up another disease condition that probably can benefit the most, but is the most scrutinized when it comes to taking care of their children, and that is those children with sickle cell disease, because they are immediately quickly
labeled, yes.
And their parents are quickly labeled as drug seekers. And this is horrible. Like, who does that? Well, who does it is my colleagues in the emergency department. Right. And it's because they've been conditioned to be on the lookout for the big bad boogeyman called a drug of some sort. However, the patients really do well with cannabis, but are even afraid to mention it because they've already been so traumatized by being victimized from my colleagues in the medical establishment as being, addicts.
Drug seeking. And I would also point out the racial demographics of who has sickle cell.
Exactly.
So that's why there's so many intersections and layers when you talk about this. I usually talk about it as drug policy reform. It's criminal justice reform. But those two complexes, the pharmaceutical complex plus the criminal industrial complex, work really, really hand in hand to keep, to make this be where it is now. Like we said, the Schaefer report came out 50 years ago. There's still 19 states that have not decriminalized at the bare minimum, 19 states that are still living under full prohibition. My heart goes out to any parent of a kid who lives in one of those states who finds themselves faced with this, because that's your first thing, is to your job is to take care of that child. And when everyone around you is stigmatizing it, it is, it's almost untenable. It's like, it's hard. It's honestly, my human beings are now 22, almost 22, 24, and 26. And it still is a hard thing for me to talk about. It is something that will still bring me to tears at any given point in time, thinking about wanting to help my kids and possibly not being able to, which is, I guess, why I did things like run for office. It was like, we're going to change this.
Although
But-
I will say, I'm really amazed. I'm just amazed at the bravery of the women who went against everything in society, probably family and friends, who just used this medicine for their children anyways, because they knew what it was. And that's such a powerful thing to go against everything around you that's
Yeah.
telling you you're doing wrong. But I do believe what you're saying. I think it's the micro macro stories. So I've heard many, many women talk about how, their Republican military grandfather who would never consider ever talking about cannabis, when they realized that their grandchild was using something to get over some sort of disease or whatever, the grandfather's heart opened up and you could see it. So that's the way we change conversations. It's like a little one, another little one, a little one, but it's the bravery. It's the bravery of the moms who are willing to step up and do this stuff, because I don't know what I would have done. I mean, I actually don't know. I mean, what I thought it was when my kids were little, I don't know what I would have done, honestly. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a thing. And there's also the thing in the reverse. There's the, we have a state's attorney in the Chicagoland area who was very open about her mother using cannabis while she was growing up to handle some mental health issues, some anxiety issues, some all kinds of things like that. She never was in a situation where she was in position to lose her children over it. But to this day, her daughter, who is now a very successful attorney and an elected state's attorney and a criminal justice reform warrior, would tell you she was a better mom because of it. So the stigma goes both ways, like whether or not you find medicinal uses for your child or whether you are a parent that becomes a better parent.
That's what the moms say. The mom and their kids are so smart. Like their kids know. The kids know. They're not interested in it because it's mom's medicine. And they're smart. They know about it. They're not like making stuff up. If someone offers them a joint, they can ask what the terpene contents are. They know what to ask for.
They do. And they're completely different than what's happening in this adult population that it's been so stigmatized for so long that if it's in the house, people are not afraid at all to show any of their drinking habits. Not afraid to buy beautiful decanters for their wine, have wine with dinner, have wine with whatever. The culture is surrounds the acceptance of that. This is something that is still, even if you agree with the policy itself, it's still hidden, it's still in the shadows, it's still really difficult to talk about because there's the stigma that surrounds it. Like, what kind of mom are you? Like, how are you? And again, for people my age, like I grew up with DARE. There's nothing good that could ever come from this. You're never going to succeed in anything. You're going to waste your life away. You'll never get off the couch. But I'm like, a couple Supreme Court justices and a couple presidents of the United States kind of got to the pinnacle of success. And that's not exactly what happened to them. And I think kids today now know, if they know that we are telling them there's no medicinal use to this, which is what Schedule 1 means, that it's going to ruin your life and that it can kill you. Some people will even go as far to say that it's the entree drug to everything else that can kill you. They know you're not telling the truth. So then how do we have better conversations about the things that can kill you when they know we're not telling the truth about this? Because they are the first ones that will call out the hypocrisy. The first ones. Okay. Let's move into some risk factors. We're gonna move into adult use now. And again, thank you guys for being here. We have Joyce Gerber, Leah Maurer, and Dr. Carmen Jones that have joined us to talk about all manner of things. We're gonna have another guest a little bit later as we wrap things up. But let's go to the potential consequences. There's a brain development to age of 25. So cannabis use disorder. How do you talk about that? How do you tell your kids about that? How do you know? Do you know? Like one of the things I would say to my kids, you don't know. I don't know who's going to respond that way. I've grown up with people who you could see in hindsight, that was cannabis use disorder, where there was an over-reliance on it. And then there are plenty of people who consume normally and naturally and never have really any negative side effects. And to me, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong or add to this, my gut always said it's no different than alcohol. There's some people who should never drink. There's some people's brain chemistry means they should never drink. There's some people who shouldn't consume. There's some people who shouldn't consume for those things. So talk to me about how you get that message out about the risk factors while we're talking about legalization, Dr. Jones.
Okay, thank you. I'm excited about this topic.
Okay.
Part of the reason is it continues to dispel myths, right? So let's think about the average teenager, maybe the one who goes off to college, and what they're free for the very first time. So the big worry is that if we legalize cannabis, everybody will begin to be high and do all sorts of crazy things, as if a 19-year-old wasn't going to do all sorts of crazy things anyway. And even if they weren't, they have access to those choice. They can make a choice for themselves. A lot of them will leave home, whether they go to college or move out on their own or whatever. But think about it logically. Kids go off and they may have a drink and they get drunk and they say, I'll never touch tequila again. And pretty much they don't. Or someone tries cannabis for the first time and say, it wasn't for me. But I like this, sweet, fruity cocktail or whatever. So logic has to play into it before we pound our adult fears there. However, there are risk factors and there are some cautions that we need to watch out for. Everyone kind of by now, I believe a lot of people know that, the adolescent brain continues to develop. And they say up to about 25. And the funny part to me is, as though cannabis is going to somehow influence these poor decisions that teenagers make, it's not been proven out. It's suspected. So they give the caution that your brain is still developing. Please don't interfere with that. The endocannabinoid system starts developing along with the regular organs and is fully functional before 12 weeks in the fetus, when all of the organs are developed. So your pathways are set, but yes, they tend to grow at different rates depending on the organ system we're discussing. So risk factors, of course, is what type of exposure did they have? Was it normalized in their home? Was mom and dad sitting around? It's no big deal. Kids also, remember, teenagers want to do the thing that's secret, that's hidden, that's taboo. So it's almost acts in reverse, right? So if we are secretly hiding the stash, some child may go and try and find the stash. Let's see what this is all about. When it's out in the open, logic says, well, it's not even that scary, so I don't have to do that. Studies show that cannabis use has not changed over the last 20 years amongst almost any age group, maybe slightly ticked up between the 18 to 25-year-olds, it was the 12 to 17-year-olds, but not the worrisome group of the 18 to 25-year-olds, those who are reaching out or venturing out into life. And none of the statistics were significant. So in the states that have legalized, there have been no significant increases in cannabis use among youth. That's key, because that was the whole argument. The whole argument was, we can't do this. The kids will be hurt. The kids know more than you do, Grandma. And what you should do is ask them to help you, because they will help you get the right thing for your arthritis.
Yes. Yeah, but when we specifically talk about cannabis use disorder, what does that mean?
Right. So
what are risk factors associated with certain mental health conditions?
Right. So those, I call myself trying to be concise. Okay, cannabis use disorder is essentially the phrase that we used to call drug dependence, or well, we'll leave it at that. But there are some people who have a different response to cannabis, where it's more of my understanding is more of a psychological dependence than a physiologic dependence. In other words, if someone has the propensity to lay around on the couch and just be high all day, my suspicion is they have another diagnosis. And instead of labeling them as cannabis use disorder, we should find out, why is it that you're laying on the couch all day, and address their depression, address that anxiety, etc. I see head shaking, so I feel like I'm understanding this concept, but I know that we as humans and health professionals tend to want to label things, but there are risk factors. Again, I mentioned exposure, mental health issues, peer pressure, and those, I'm going to add in their genetics. So if you think about this, there are some people, like you mentioned, Toi, that are, I call them Snoop Dogg Juniors. They can just get it in every day, all day long, and run a major company, go to work, do the cleaning of the house, etc. Take care of the kids, no big deal, they need it. That's their medicine. Kids are like, Mom, did you have your medicine today? Because you're kind of grumpy. Then there are people.
Saturday Night Live skits on kids or husbands or anybody else that did you,
right?
Because you're grumpy.
Go take your medicine. Then there are those people who may, I call them the people who cannot puff pass at the party. There's 2 hits and they're out like in the corner. And so to me, that it's not to me, but I understand it through a genetic standpoint. There are people who have endocannabinoid system upregulation and downregulation. So depending on who you are, how much you consume, how tolerant your body is because of your genetics will determine your response. And there are now tests being developed to see which one of those you are.
Okay. I'm like moving, I'm moving my cord so that I don't run out of juice.
I love that you said that there's actually tests being done. I've been asking around for medical professionals because that seems to be the thing that we would have had more cannabinoid accessible to our bodies at a time. So now we're literally people who are just, there's a deficit. And if you could figure that out or understand it.
Yeah, there's a company that I've partnered with. I don't know if this is allowed or not, but he does endodna.com. He does genetic testing to see your cannabis use tolerance. This is a gentleman named Lynn Mays, very popular in the industry. And I did mine, because I wanted to see what it was that I needed to help my own arthritis. And I found it very valuable. Talked about your opioid dependence, genetic predisposition for that, and other medical conditions, just like that 23andMe would do. And they speak specifically to the links that are connected to cannabis metabolism.
Okay, so I'm going to ask this question to all of us. This is moms talking about this now. And I don't mean it to be a gotcha question at all, but I do know that the entire time I was in the elected space, reporters used to love to go, so do you use cannabis? So the question I'm going to ask is, do you consume with your children? At what stages, at what ages they are? How did you get to the point where you felt comfortable, or you don't feel comfortable about that? But I want to have a little brief conversation about this, like, it's ubiquitous, it's everywhere. People are always talking about it. There are those that, have a very strong attachment to the plant. And in some households, it's revered, especially when you add the cultural aspects to that, and depending on where you live in the world. But do you consume around your children? Are you hesitant to consume around your children? How do you talk about this to other moms and other things? And I would go around, I'll give you, if we have time, I'll give you some of my own funny anecdotes, because it was, I said earlier in the thing, my kids caught me. I didn't catch them.
I'd be happy to start that one. I would love to hear what other panelists have to say. My kids, I have 3 boys. They're 16, 14, and 10. And so there has not been a crossover with our use just yet. We have had very candid, I'm like you, Toi, I grew up right around the DARE era where, like, just say no, everything's bad. Send you to hell, everything's gonna mess your life up for the rest of the world. And so coming from that very, very prohibition like mindset and what I was taught, and leaning back on my own experience and kind of how I came to using the plant, and the first time, my partner Travis and I really tried to do kind of the opposite of that in our parenting, and really give them access to all of the information from as early as they were developmentally capable of understanding it, pretty much, and that looks different for a 2-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 16-year-old. It looks very different. And that's for you to decide as a parent, what's most comfortable and what feels best for you. But I do absolutely believe that by giving these young people the knowledge and the facts and the resources about this plant is the best way that we can prepare them to make the right decisions when they have their first encounter with it, or when they move out and have all this freedom to do things that maybe they haven't had before in their life. Because that's what we're really trying to do with young people and with everyone, but especially with young people, is give them the knowledge, give them the education to empower themselves to make the right decisions for their own body, whatever that might look like, that with them, being in touch with their physical health, their mental health, things like that. So I do not use with my children, but they have absolutely seen us use it. They've seen our friends use it that are adults. I feel very much, I live in Portland, which is like the microbrewery capital of the world. And so everywhere here, all the family events, all the community events have beer. There's beer gardens, there's beer vendors, other kinds of alcohol, everything. So that's very, very normalized, just like it is in a lot of places in American society. And I feel very fortunate that, I've been able to raise them here in Portland, Oregon, where it's not quite like that with cannabis, but it is more normalized. If you're going to, someone's house or a backyard barbecue per se, or something like that, where they're going to see, it was important to us that they saw responsible cannabis consumption early on, just like I wanted them to see responsible alcohol, consumption early on. That, if we were around an adult that was not handling themselves well, that, they saw that, and that we were able to make the right decisions as parents about where we wanted them to be at that time. Same thing with cannabis, which is, I think probably we can all agree, it's much rarer that you'll see an adult out of control when they're using cannabis as opposed to using alcohol. So that was really important for us. And we wanted that to be a part of the conversation, because I do know parents that, really approach it the same way as like, well, we have a wine rack and we have a liquor cabinet. So why don't we have a designated area where where they know where that is too? This wine rack's sitting right next to the dinner table we eat at every single night. So why would we hide our cannabis use? Like, they know where our smoking accessories are. They know where our flower is. Like, they see us use it just like they would see us drink a glass of wine or, whatever it is. So I feel like that's one, spin that's really important to put on it as you're talking with your children about it is, the developmental piece and the, policy piece, obviously, because we don't want anybody getting in trouble or making decisions that's going to get them in trouble. And then, then that whole piece about your own health and being able to empower yourselves with education and things like that. So that's kind of where I would start, and kind of where I'm at on my journey with my children as a parent who consumes cannabis and advocates for it being legal and all the things that are intertwined with that.
Wonderful. That's the way I talk about all of those things, just that, information is power, not permission.
Absolutely.
Information is power. And I want to raise empowered kids that know how to handle what it is that comes at them, whether I'm there or not. And I love that you brought up like the wine rack is right by the dinner table where we eat wine with every time everybody comes over. We talk about this, and got to give parents the ability to normalize this in a way where you can talk about it the same way you talk to your children about alcohol, because it's everywhere. So we got a little bit of a late start. I want to jump to see if there's any questions we need to handle from the chat for any of our folks on the panel. Are there any things like that? I've not been able to.
Can I tell a funny pandemic story just with my kids because they're older? I kind of came to the world like so. So I had my cannabis awakening in 2016, and I do have a pretty funny story about being at the Cape House with my son in a bong, but that's not really. But during the pandemic, my children were in college. My son was having his junior year abroad. My daughter was in another state, and they came home like refugees in March of 2020. And I did not know that cannabis would be essential. And I was running around like a mad woman, like picking up salves and tinctures and flour. And like, we had no toilet paper, but we had everything else, when they came home. And we got the kids home and they're like, Mom, there's no liquor. I'm like, yeah, but we're going to make it through with cannabis. We're going to be nice to each other. And I would way rather be in lockdown with a stoner than a drinker. That is what I have learned. And we were so nice to each other. My son's a musician. We played music. We have a cannabis porch now. Like literally our entire porch has been turned into like a bong, beautiful my bud-based bongs and, crystal glassware. Like it's very pretty. And it's just been very normalized and
very warm and open, welcoming space.
Yeah, and it's made us we sit and we talk to each other. Anyway, so I just think we didn't when we were younger because I wasn't a consumer, but I can see how the normalization, it's just a thing that you do for your parents are happy. Don't they want to see you happy?
I have a comment too about that if I can. I will say this briefly. I have seen everyone from the police to the pastor in my office. And every time it is the police or the pastor, they're always coming in kind of sheepish and shy, like they're feeling embarrassed for all of the damage they've done over the past. And I make them repent too, by the way. There was a parent, I'm going to call her our pearl clutching church lady. And she said, I don't understand, how come I have to explain this every time we walk down the street and we're smelling it? And I said, well, when you pass someone who's been drinking, do you explain that? Because I think you should use your common sense and treat it the same way. This is something that adults do. Keep walking, child, because this is an adult behavior. And it doesn't have to, you don't have to go into the details about, well, that's this horrible drug, et cetera, et cetera. Just be reasonable about it. And that way you don't have to go into any great deal of explanation about why this smells funny. Well, that's because there's an adult over there smoking, period. And that's it, keep walking. All right, that's my soapbox.
Yeah, that is, I don't want to miss, because there is a parenting thing in here we haven't talked about, and I'll talk about it just because I don't know what other kids you guys have, but I have 2 sons. And my conversations with them were not ever about the moral use of cannabis, but they were about law enforcement. They were about the risk that would inure to them. We knew that the minute they walked off of our porch, that, nobody was going to ask their mom, is your mom a senator? Like, it wasn't that. It was, they were going to see a 6-foot tall Black man with some weed on, some cannabis in his pocket, or, that was something we had to prepare them for. So for the larger conversations that happened in our house about cannabis was really about what could happen to you if you get caught, if you were too young doing this, if you're under 21, if you have a law enforcement encounter, how do you handle that? And the biggest thing that I would say over and over again, it was like, it doesn't matter what the stop is with the law enforcement person in that position of, I just need you to get home alive. We can handle anything else afterwards. I need you to survive the encounter itself. Let us worry about the legal stuff. Let us worry about we'll deal with if that were ever to happen. I need you to be alive. When you come back, I need you to tell me what happened. Not for me to find out some other kind of horrendous way because of an encounter that goes bad. And that's the worst part about all of this, that we're living in a country where there's a multi-billion-dollar industry and an entire ecosystem around it, but we're still arresting 600,000 people every single year for simple possession. So in Black and brown households, our conversations are not just about whether or not you're a good person or a bad person if you smoke weed or you drink or you anything you do. It is how to keep yourself safe in society, in the world. And I didn't want to not have that be a part of this conversation. But we have another panelist that just joined us. So I want to introduce Jessica Gonzalez of the Mommy Jane. She's a cannabis mom blogger and advocate. Jessica, welcome to the town hall. You are right on time because we're just about to talk about the best way, to talk about this to your kids. So Jessica, someone who's been open about consuming to manage anxiety and depression. How do you talk to your kids about cannabis?
It's funny because I also have 2 children. They're both girls. And they both learned at different times. The oldest learned at an older age than the youngest. And I was not here in the beginning, so I don't know if anyone's covered this, but I truly believe when your child is ready. It's when they're inquisitive, when they want to know. That's what I base it on. I don't just sit them down for Saturday's morning lesson because they're going to be like, one ear out the other. I want it to be something that they come to me with. And my youngest was actually more curious at an earlier age, and it was organic, and it was important that along the way, I'm also teaching, there are children that use cannabis because they can use it medicinally too. And I am teaching along the way that, Women use it medicinally because there's receptors right where we have our reproductive system, and my girls are going to need that one day. They're going to need those. I mean, one of them already uses the salves and stuff for their cramps and everything. But I'm not only advocating for myself and who's here. I'm advocating for my girls, for my girls, for my girls, boys, for my girls, whatever they want. The humans that they decide to have, if they decide to have them, I want them to be able to freely use this plant without shame. I want them to use it proudly, and I want them to be able to educate others so that when they are questioned in public, they have the correct response with another adult or with a peer, so that my 14-year-old knows not to get cannabis from her friends and knows how to approach it mindfully and make sure that it's coming from a really trusted source. And so that's my approach. Is I can't tell you the right age. I feel like you will know the right age when to talk to your children about cannabis. And if it's 3 years old, it's 3 years old. And if it's 13, it's 13. I did not know about my parents' cannabis use until I was 19 years old. It was growing in my backyard my whole life, and I had no idea because there's so many effing plants. So please understand, I felt like I was bamboozled. I'm like, 19? Mom, Dad, we're in the Bay Area. Like, you could have talked about this years ago, but I wasn't inquisitive. All they made sure was that I was not going to use it with shame, because we grew up with the Compassion Care Act. We grew up with cannabis card patients in our family. So there was never shame, but I didn't know their personal decisions to grow and use cannabis medicinally till I was much older. And you know what? I think that was probably better, because had I known those plants were there, I probably would have taken them a little too soon, and it probably would have ruined the whole growth. So it's just, it's a learning curve, and I hope you follow your hearts, and I hope you utilize, those of you that are watching, the references that are here, whether it's the people that are on this panel, or, women like, High Society Mama has made a guide for how to talk to your children about cannabis. There's a lot of resources out there now that weren't available to me when I was pregnant 14 years ago. So utilize, like I said, what's available to you, and start those conversations with those parents you hang out with when you're out. And I say it casually, like, oh, no wine for me. I prefer my happy hours a little green. However you want to approach it, and those conversations with the parents will then normalize it for the other parents. And it becomes this trickle effect of education. And if you guys follow me, education is destigmatization. And that's how I feel. And that's how we all feel. That's why we're here today.
That's why we're here today. So for some people who are listening, though, seriously, there are people who would, they'll ask you point blank, how do you talk to someone who's 6? How do you talk to someone who's like, when it's middle or end of elementary going into middle school, 7 and 12? Right? That's different than the way you talk to them at 13. I thought when we were coming up with the questions for this panel, I was like, there are all kinds of different conversations. There's a public health conversation. There's a moral conversation. There's a criminal justice thing. There's a brain science conversation. And all of those things are different. It's not like you do it. And so I think for me, I'll take the first stab at answering this, is that I love what Jessica just said. When they're ready, when they're asking questions and you answer what they ask, no different than when you're talking about alcohol or sex or anything else it's hard to talk about. When they ask you, you answer what they asked. And then thinking about the way you talk about the conversation as it related to criminal justice happened with my son as he was going away to college, because I knew he was leaving the house. And, like, we could control as much as we thought we could control when they were like teenagers in the house and, could drive and could go out and stuff. But the first in-depth real law enforcement conversation that I had about the criminal justice system, its possible impact on him, was when he was about to leave to go to college. And at the time, he's 18, then I had a 16 and I had a 14-year-old. So the other two did get it in high school because he was going off to college. And so just like he started taking out the garbage first, he got the first, like in-depth kind of, this is how you handle yourself when you don't live in the house anymore. And I was really, what I found myself more afraid of was not giving him that talk, so that would be a thing that he wouldn't know how to respond to. We grew up in a neighborhood where he didn't have any impact. He didn't have any. He wasn't, we just grew up in an area where that just was not a concern that we had to have on a regular basis. But he was about to leave my house and go all the way downstate, 5 hours away from where I was. And when I tell you, I cried. Like, my two kids were like, he's not dead. Like, I know, but I need him to be as strong as possible. I need to be as knowledgeable as possible. And I knew the number one thing outside of alcohol was going to be cannabis. It was going to be, I knew that. And it would be like parental malfeasance for me not to prepare him or talk to or tell him how I felt about it. But when they're littler, you know, like they're 20, my youngest is 20, is going to be 22 now. I didn't have this conversation when they were 7 or 8 and they didn't ask me. I think that's different now though. I do think it's different now just because we talk about it just in the general sphere now differently than we did before that. So anybody have me like Jessica laid it out first, like when they ask, when they're, you know, how do you describe it at 7 as opposed to at 15?
I mean, it's, oh, sorry.
No, please go ahead from the mommy standpoint first.
I'm just gonna say there are so many books out there now, like stories. I explained everything to my kids through stories. Like when, you know, my cat was dying and I bought a book about a cat dying and cried every time I read it. And my kids were like, why are you reading that? It makes you sad. But stories are very powerful. I think that's the power of the Canna Mom Show, these stories. So you know, that what's growing in grandma's garden, or Mallory's on, I saw this, her book about the train, and there's just like, there's lots of things out there just to make it, again, popular culture, access to information that's accessible to them. Stories are the perfect way to do it, I think, you know. And then again, they're not that interested. If you're doing something, your kids do not care about it. If they see you, they're like, it's theirs, I don't care. You know, it's just normal parenting, you know, psychology. So, but yeah, I think the books are a really good one. Okay.
So I will echo the opinions of everyone else in terms of how they have experienced talking to their kids in real time. But one thing I want to lead with, and that is, this is something that I've always done as a pediatrician in talking to the parents. I can't tell you how many times there would be a conversation that may come up about sex, and the parents want to have a private conversation with me, and then tell me to talk to their kid about it. So my approach has always been this: number one, respect children. I can't say it enough and I can't say it loud enough. They are not just tiny human beings, they are simply human beings. And they have obviously different levels of understanding based on their age or their maturity, but you meet them where they are and you destigmatize it and you be honest with them, only to the point, like Ms. Jessica said, what they are able to understand and what they ask about. But don't lie to kids. They can smell it from a mile away. Respect their inquiries and be as forthright with them as you can, based on, again, their age and their level of maturity. You don't have to say more, but you must address it and it must be answered, especially if it's asked, with respect. In the way I've practiced, that's always been the best policy.
Thank you for that. This is one of our last things before we sign off here. But so if you have a kid under the age of 21 and you first discover that they're using cannabis, what's the best way to respond?
Ask them why they're doing it. What's going on here? What made you decide to do this? Oh, it makes me feel more relaxed. Wait a minute, were you not feeling relaxed before that? Is something occurring in your life? Did something change to make you more anxious? Let's talk about that. And then you can then further direct them. And by the way, once you find those answers out, the next question is, so when you use it, how does it make you feel? Here's the key, everyone. We need to be looking for the difference between medication and escapism. Escapism is the segue to perhaps other substances. And we are not trying to escape our problems, we're trying to manage them. And if escapism is what's happening, that's a whole nother conversation, a different level, in my opinion, that needs to be addressed.
Anybody else want to add? I see Jessica writing.
Intention's everything to me. Intention is so important. I wrote it down because I never want to forget that. We need to understand the difference between medication. I've admittedly trickled, back and forth on that line before, especially during the pandemic. Am I medicating or am I escaping right now? And I feel like honestly, with the introduction of minor cannabinoids, it's definitely helped avoid that high THC, dosage. But for the newbies, they need to know the difference going into this, and the children, absolutely, because I don't want my children to feel like mom's using this for an escapism. I want them to understand that I do use it intentionally and as a healing modality, along with the other stuff that I use. So that was so big. And I'm sure we already covered language, but I feel like that's up there too, how Dr. Carmen was saying.
We haven't. Go ahead, go for it. We haven't. The language around this.
The language around the cannabis is so big to me. I try and avoid, this is just me personally, but I even try and avoid using terms like weed and pot. And I know, like, between my parents, that's totally different, but the dialogue with the conversations and who you're talking to, I try and use cannabis as much as possible, to the point that my children say, hey, I smell cannabis, or that's a cannabis leaf over there. When they spot it in public on a person's shirt, they say it's a cannabis leaf. So I want that language to continue. And I know we all have our opinions on the language. It's just, for myself personally and for my family, that's mommy's medicine. I don't say, oh, that's my pot over there, or whatever. It's just how we use it, how we talk about it is going to set the tone for how they view us and why we choose plant medicine.
Mm-hmm.
So set those standards for yourself. Also, intention when you do consume. Are you like totally blasted out of your head and sitting on the couch when you should be probably making their lunches at 8 a.m.? It's what we're using and why we're using it. Are their needs met? Are you still spending time with them? Are you still involved with your community and everything like that? So all those things factor in, and I believe that are truly important when it comes to that sort of normalization when we're talking to other people. Excuse me, sorry, someone's walking through the room right now. I apologize. I'm just gonna stay focused for a second. But when it comes down to it, I really do believe, like, our children's needs met? Are we still being good parents? Are we still being good citizens? What's the face that we put forward when it comes to children, and being a cannabis user and a parent? That's all.
Thank you, guys. This has been a really, really good conversation. And before we go, I want to give all of you all an opportunity to share your final thoughts and your social handles so people can.
Toi, there are questions that didn't get answered.
Okay. All right. Let me finish this part. So before we finish this thing, I want to give you guys a chance. You'll do your final wrap up, and then be sure to tell people how to stay in touch with you. This is going to live, for a while on the website. We want you to be able to come back again and again and again. It'll be on YouTube. But we definitely want to let people know how to get in touch with each one of you guys. I want to make sure we get to this one. There was one question about recommendations for school to become certificated in the cannabis industry. I wasn't sure exactly what that question meant.
I think like Green Flower, they're discussing something like that, or Mary Jane University, things like that for certification, Herb Psalm, that kind of stuff.
Okay. I see there's one in here too, that are there any don'ts when it comes to talking to kids about cannabis, and what should we not do?
So I would say, please don't buy it from Ray down the street. And that is because we don't know what he's doing to it. We don't know what it's what it may have been fertilized with, if anything. I want parents to have a direct, engaging conversation, particularly if it's with their teen, about what they've tried. For instance, those super high concentrates straight to the head. Why would you need that? Especially if we're going to acknowledge that they may be using it medicinally. And finally, to Jessica's point, I have been saying the word cannabis for 10 years, trying to make it very scientific. And then last week, someone said, but people don't really know what that is. They know the word marijuana. So we might sometimes need to speak to people, children, where they are.
Yeah.
And what happens is when we say cannabis, they think that's something up here. No, I'm talking about regular marijuana that you know about. And its scientific name is cannabis. We may need to become better communicators as advocates and educators. And remember that sometimes people don't know what that word means, or they think it's something that it's not, or something that's different.
Well, that also goes back to the history of why we call it, why we call it marijuana in the first place. So this is, it is an amazing thing when you realize how many at the time that there was cannabis in people's homes, in medicines, in all kinds of things. So calling it marijuana specifically to target people of color, Mexicans and Blacks, musicians, jazz musicians, all people, wasn't a war on drugs. It was really a war on people. And they couldn't necessarily make us illegal, so they would make what we do illegal. And then that would be something other that you didn't really understand. I find it very interesting just because I'm president and CEO of the Marijuana Policy Project. Marijuana is in the name of this. This is the oldest leading national advocate that changes laws. And again, since 1995. And that was when it was not cool to have marijuana in your name at all. But I find that normally I start with, like I said, where people are at, so we'll use personally, colloquially, I will use multiple words as I'm beginning the relationship so I can steer people towards cannabis. That we need to understand that this is what this is. And this is where the policy and the thing comes from. But we can't ignore the fact that people call it what they call it. I just did a panel for what's happening across the Caribbean. And the way it's written in the law in Jamaica is ganja. They don't call it marijuana. They don't call it weed, they don't call it pot, they call it ganja. And when you take into consideration the cultural practices, the religious uses, then all those things that happen as a result of it, this really has been a fascinating learning experience for me. And it's now growing globally, but that's where this all starts, is in the home. It really starts in the home. And that is why we wanted to have this conversation with this stellar group of people who get what it's like to be a mom in this space and to see all kinds of kids. And we wanted to give people the tools to start these conversations. Feel free to use this. When you see this, you can play this for your spouse, your significant other, your partner. When you're talking about how to talk about this with your kids, there are multiple resources. We will try to have those available. You can also reach us at mpp.org. It's only $25 to be a member over the course of the year. We would love to have you. We would love to have you join the fight. Our sole job is to go change laws, change lives. And I know of no better place and no first place to do that than moms. Seriously. So thank you all for being here. So final thoughts, give your social handles and tell people how to stay in touch with you. Joyce, go first. I'll do this. Joyce, you go.
All right. I am Joyce Gerber from the Canna Mom Show. You can find my podcast everywhere you listen to your favorite podcast. I am on Instagram at the Canna Mom Show. I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. I think I might even be on TikTok. And I am launching May 1st, the first ever Keep the Canna Mom Conversation Going campaign so we can support season 4, which will begin in September. So it's on the website. We get some great giveaways, like this beautiful scarf that I am wearing. So for your support, or a copy of the book, Courage in Cannabis, love your support because these stories are amazing. I want to do a whole nother season with all the amazing women who keep contacting me, because we got to elevate these stories, because this is our industry, ladies. This plant is a caregiver. We are caregivers. This should be built in our image. So thank you for your support, and thank you for inviting me on. This was wonderful, and thank you for meeting all of you. This has been a great afternoon.
Awesome. You go next, Leah.
Thank you. I'm Leah Maurer, just like it's spelled on my nameplate right there. I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram if you want to get a hold of me. Would also direct you to www.theweedblog.com, my website, where there's lots of information posted about this topic and many other topics that have to do with cannabis. And thank you again, Toi, and thank you so much to MPP for hosting such an important discussion today.
Thanks, guys. Dr. Jones.
Okay, well, again, thank you as well for having me. It has been my pleasure, because I feel like I've been evangelizing this plant for the last 10 years. So I am that geeky one who has all their social media stuff ready for you. It's in the chat in a row. I am Wildflower Medical Consultants, and I do most of my work consulting with patients who use cannabis as medicine, particularly those with complicated medical backgrounds, more than one diagnosis usually, particularly elderly folks or anyone, but I can be reached at wildflowermedical.com and on all the socials that I have listed in the chat.
Wonderful. And Jessica.
Hi, everyone. Thanks again for letting me join in late. It's been an honor to be here with all of you. And I am excited to rewatch this and learn even more and educate myself. Just like Dr. Jones was saying, even as an advocate, I'm always learning and always finding ways to better myself and better my dialogue. So thank you for allowing me to share a little slice of my life with all of you today. You can follow me at the Mommy Jane, anywhere there's social media, and stay tuned. I'll be doing some really amazing things with Tokeativity this summer. And I love you all very much and appreciate all your time and energy and effort.
That's so wonderful. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us. Thank you for people who are listening and staying with us. Again, you'll be able to see this. This is going to be evergreen. It'll be live. So for this marijuana mom, who happens to be president and CEO of the Marijuana Policy Project, we thank you and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everybody.